Out on the square now, let's talk about a common goal for parents, raising kids who care about others.
You'll find some helpful advice about how to do that in a new book from a professor at Oregon State. It's called Creating Compassionate Kids, Essential Conversations to Have with Young Children. Happy to have author Shauna Tominey here to tell us about discussing with kids. And Shauna, I want to start off with what you consider an essential conversation. What would be an example?
Sure, that's a great question. And I'll say that the conversations in this book were really inspired by years of working with children and families around the country as a teacher, as a parenting educator, and now as a parent myself. So the conversations that I include in the book are both those that we have every day or that challenge us.
Yeah.
Like those conversations about the tough emotions that our children have and how we handle that.
What are other messages you put in here about teaching kids just to be members of the world around them as well?
That's a great question as well. And a big section of the book is actually about how we teach children about the qualities that make them who they are, as well as those qualities that shape others, whether or not they're qualities that our children recognize in themselves, from race to culture to different types of families. And then also getting into challenging topics, how we address those with our children. So not only can we help them build the skills they need to manage those challenges themselves, but so they have empathy and understanding in the way that they might approach others experiencing those kinds of situations.
Not to oversimplify, but do you at some point sit your child down and say, here's how to be a caring person?
I think it's more than just sitting them down once. It's happening all the time in the way that we act as people, as parents, as caregivers. And it's not just what we show our children, it's how we explain to them what we're doing and why that helps our children learn to think in that same way. So not just holding the door open for someone, but saying, I'm going to hold this door open because I see someone with a really heavy bag and it looks like they need my help.
Yeah, the world would be a much better place if this was required reading. How'd this come about? How did this idea spawn? And tell us about the inspiration from your daughter.
Sure. Well, I'm continually inspired by my own daughter in terms of thinking about how do I help her become a compassionate human being. And in, as I mentioned, being in this field for the last 20 years, seeing all around the country that parents and caregivers have different kinds of conversations with children. That some have to have conversations about the differences that really define them, like race or gender identity, whereas other families aren't having those same conversations. So looking at how do we share that responsibility so it isn't just families or children in a minority group who are having to explain, educate, or defend themselves. How do we help our children be a part of that conversation, all of our children?
And I mentioned to you that we're in this culture of rewarding kids, that every time they do something, we say, oh, let's go out for ice cream, or let's do this because we helped someone else. And you say what to that?
Well, I think that sometimes bribing or rewarding in that way is a really quick and easy way to reward. But at the same time, a reward for our children is spending time with us. Is having a connection with somebody else. And when we focus on that as being the reward of, I noticed that you did this.
And really quickly, your own behavior. They model you as well, right, as the parent.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And sometimes we make mistakes as parents. And to step back and say, I really wish I had done this another way, and say that to our child, if that's something that we want to see in them too, to treat ourselves and them as learners in this, because we all make mistakes.
What a great book.
The book, once again, Creating Compassionate Kids, and information about having those essential conversations. Thanks so much for stopping by. I really appreciate it. Good information.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks.